Hello, my name is Noel Kingsbury, and with my colleague Annie Guilfoyle, we put on Garden Masterclass. We thought we should put this little introduction to Garden Masterclass together for those of you who've not come across us before but have arrived at our YouTube channel. We aim to put on one-day educational events with the most creative and innovative people in the garden and landscape world up and down the British Isles, and that includes the Republic of Ireland. We've also started looking at putting on events on the European mainland, and this year we had one planned in France, one in Germany, and 3 in the Netherlands. Of course, our physical events this year are having to be rescheduled, but we're trying to do what we can online. Our events take place in garden environments where there's plenty to look at. And here we've got Nigel Dunnett, for example, in Trentham Gardens, discussing with a group the planting he has put together there. Or Sarah Price, the award-winning garden designer, talking about using drawing as a design tool at Treberwith Nursery in South Wales. Here, Marina Christopher, who runs a wonderful perennial nursery in the southeast of England at Parham House, talking about how she puts together perennials for effective planting design. And landscape architect and urban sketcher Liz Ackley talking about using drawing as a design tool for people in the landscape and garden design business. Since coronavirus has constrained what we do, we've gone online. Increasingly, we are hoping to run in-depth webinars. However, for the moment, what we're offering is every Monday and Friday at 4 o'clock London time, a broadcast, round about an hour, with information, education, and some entertainment. We talk with somebody from the garden world, we look at what they're doing, perhaps sometimes we'll have a panel. So far, we've had people from Britain, Ireland, Italy, and the United States. We've got plans to speak to people in Argentina, Ukraine, Lithuania, Japan, New Zealand. So we are pretty global. Our aim is to bring together gardeners all over the world to share experiences and see us through this difficult time. If you'd like to keep in touch, do please look at our website, or if you want to receive our occasional email newsletter, then do send us an email to gardenmasterclass@gmail.com and we'll put you on our mailing list, which of course will go no further than us. So we hope to meet you online, and hopefully one day we may even meet you in the flesh. Goodbye, stay safe and enjoy this particular recording.
Okay, good. All right. In sunny Devon, which is in the west of England, the glorious west of England. I'm saying that because that's the area that I was born in. And it's the amazing Mark Diacono, who is the man behind Otter Farm, and the writer of how many award-winning cookbooks, Mark? I mean, have you lost count?
I do a bit, because it's always the one you're working on that's in your head the most, but I think maybe 11 altogether.
Wow, amazing.
Like
It's when I've noticed that when people are being interviewed at the moment on TV, they always sit with their Oscars behind them on the shelf. So it might be a good idea for you to put all your awards up behind you on the shelf. You're about to
all like this.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, Mark, would you start, because I just want to point out that our audience are all over the world, and so it'd be nice for you to sort of give us a little bit of background as to where you are and what you do and why you do it before we launch into your talk about what you're growing and so on. And for those people who just no, sorry, go on. Yeah, carry on.
I guess I came to all of this quite late, because usually when you speak to someone of my age who grows stuff, that you say, they've got a lovely story about how they were raised on their mother's knee, knee deep in chrysanthemums or something. I came to this very late. I met the person who became my wife, and she was really into gardening, and I figured that I ought to do something outside in the garden, otherwise I'd never see her. And If all of that was to listen to the football on the radio, she'd get very bored of me. So being a bloke, I started growing spuds because that's what English men are supposed to do. And that was a real kind of whirlwind of brilliance and ordinariness, because the first lot of potatoes I had out that year were just amazing, you know, nutty, small, salady, delicious, all of that stuff. And then the kind of later ones were just kind of similar to the ones I bought. And it was the first insight into this thing of yes, growing your own food could be the most incredible thing, but maybe I had to exercise a little bit of kind of choice and narrow things down a bit. And I kind of got the bug really quickly and started growing some more stuff, and we moved and I grew some more stuff. And because I didn't know what I was doing, you know what blokes do when they don't know what they're doing, they do it super big in the hope that the kind of momentum of this effort will somehow drag them like you've thrown a tire over the side of a boat with a rope attached to it. You will go with it, which kind of worked to a point if you forget all the stuff that went wrong. And then I learnt a bit, and then I started planting. I got a patch of land that was just 2 empty fields, and I made a list of all the food I found most delicious in the world. I crossed off all the stuff that I found out you couldn't grow here. And the list fell into 2 halves. One was, well, 3 bits really. Can you have 3 halves? You can have 3 halves. It's a masterclass, you can have 3 halves. So one half was the forgotten stuff, you know, things that I couldn't believe that we couldn't buy anywhere, that people weren't really growing so much. This is maybe 20 years ago, you know, so it was mulberries and medlars and quince and Go King Henry and that kind of stuff. And then there was the best of the familiar, which I really loved, like asparagus and, you know, tomatoes, all of that kind of stuff. And then there was this third half, which was what is probably easiest to term the kind of climate change stuff, you know, the things that maybe we could grow here with a little bit of the climate change that we were committed to anyway, even if we kind of cleaned up our act, and with the kind of warmer summers, you know, some of the stuff that was marginal, combined with really great work from plant people who were developing things like, for example, almonds are a really good example, where typically they're tricky to grow in this country because they flower early, frost comes along, takes the flowers, you don't have a chance in that. Simple as that. It's nearly always the way with that stuff. Whereas plants people were starting to develop ones that would flower a little bit later, and with the last frost getting a little bit earlier, you know, not every year, but some years there was a hope if you grew the right varieties that this stuff would happen. And I started growing some of that stuff. So it was really this kind of small holding of deliciousness. And I didn't grow anything that anybody else grew really well, because there's no point. I quite like being in a network of other people who grow stuff really well. So that's where it came from. I started, there was a connection I had with River Cottage where I wasn't kind of working there full time or anything, but I led the garden team there and kind of set the scene for that. I started writing for my own stuff, and then I wrote a few handbooks for them, and still carrying on my own stuff, started running courses and and here I am, having successfully dodged getting a real job for quite some time now. So great.
But Mark, you did have a background in ecology, didn't you? What was your you know, what were you doing before? Yeah.
Before that, I did everything kind of. I tend to do everything in life quite late. Most of that being because I think I retired from about my mid to late teens until my mid to late 20s, when I suddenly woke up and went, I better go and do something slightly productive. So I went and did a degree, and then I did a master's in environmental management. So by complete fluke, as these things often happen, it was externally examined by a guy who was a director of an environmental consultancy. He offered me a job, and I went and did that for a while, and then did my own business in exactly that stuff. So we would be advising, typically we'd be advising local authorities and government agencies about managing the landscape, but on a kind of national stroke international scale. And I was doing a lot of that stuff in parallel with the growing stuff, you know, because growing and writing is not necessarily a way to earn money. And it took a little while for that to all kind of fall into place like that, so that could take over that really.
We have some noise from somebody in the background. I'm just seeing if, there we go. Okay, they're off. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I always think it's funny because for a long time, Radio 4 would, be on the Today programme first thing in the morning, being, there's this crazy man in the West Country growing olives. He's a climate change farmer. And you knew immediately it was going to be Mark Diacono. Or, you're regularly on the food programme. You were on with Cerys Matthews a couple of weeks ago. So you've built up quite a name in being that crazy guy in the West Country, haven't you?
I think, I think so. I think, because everybody likes to eat delicious stuff, and if you can grow it interestingly, and it's not a kind of, there's no downside to all of that story, is there? Come and eat something delicious. Maybe consider what brilliant things you can do in the garden. I think, it's tricky it's tricky for someone like me on the professional side of things, because we like to shovel someone off. They're either a cook or they're a gardener, and there are a few who kind of play that middle furrow. There's Nigel Slater, there's myself, there's a few of us, but a lot of that is driven simply by books. You can't have a book that goes into the gardening section and the food section. So if you're writing books, they have to be thrown into one or the other. So that often sends someone's career this way. But I've tried to maybe hop along the dotted line down the bit. But there's always going to be some idiot who's going to try stuff before it's really ready to happen. And with a lot of the stuff, the climate change stuff, that idiot was myself. And some of it worked and some of it didn't, which is exactly how it should be. If some of it's not working, you're nowhere near the edge. If you're not right up against the edge finding out what works and doesn't, then everything's going to be fine. Well, that's not the point.
Yeah, that's true. And do you think that this moment in time, when a lot of people, most people are in lockdown, there's a voyage of discovery for them at the moment, whether they've never grown salad before, or they're trying something a bit more risky, or and they're watching it intimately on a daily basis. That there's a lot of people are going to be discovering all of this for new now, aren't they?
It's really exciting, actually, because much as hey, I grow the familiar stuff too, but as much as I might be known for growing unusual things or things that are less commonly in an allotment, let's say, I do grow the other stuff. And a lot of what I'm being asked at the moment is, I'm just starting off, or can you write us something that applies to everybody just starting off? Because this in lots of ways, this whole lockdown stroke virus thing is a little microcosm of what we can expect over the next decades or two, maybe in a slightly different time scale, but the things we know for sure are that we're in a time of changing climate. We've got limited resources. We need to climb down from the petroleum mountain where we've been partying for decades. Our food system is inherently unstable, and we need to find a better way with that. So in all of those things have been brought together really quite strongly now. And it's quite interesting that initially people's reaction was to be worried enough to buy loo roll, but not worried enough to stop going to the pub. But now half the world is going, hang on, I want to grow some of what I eat, because I don't, yes, I can probably get it, but it stops me being reliant on having to go a couple of times a week from a green stuff. But also I'm at home. And this garden sitting there, or these pots are sitting there, or there's a veranda here that I can populate with flavours. And what we also have, which is really, really exciting, is connectivity. If this had happened 25, 30 years ago, everyone would have been trying to buy a book from Amazon. Whereas now, we've got these glorious masterclasses. You can tweet somebody online and say, hey, I want to do this. How do I do it? That we can find out very quickly. I don't keep in my head the distances between, I don't know, broad beans or whatever, because yes, I probably would do it. My hands know it, but I've got a little device in my pocket that I can just find that stuff out, and everybody can. So in lots of ways, the thing now isn't, years ago it was, we all wanted to acquire knowledge, and now I think it's much more, because the knowledge in terms of facts is there for us. The thing that we're all wanting is experience. We want to take other people's experience and see what of it suits us best, but also have our own experiences based on that. And I think these are all really healthy and brilliant things, and we find ourselves in a really exciting time for all of that.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, because you know, your Instagram posts are, for me, it's always like, oh my goodness. I mean, what was the gin that you posted up yesterday that you? Well, there was a certain type that rang a bell.
It was, yes, it was. I thought you might see that one. It was Seville orange and cardamom. I think somebody had taken the recipe out of my sour book and used it, and I'd said, sit on your hands for a couple of months, because here, you know, in England, I say that here in England, the Seville orange season. Here in Spain, sent to England, the Seville orange season was kind of earlier in the year, you know. But Seville oranges and cardamom and gin go so beautifully together, you know. And this person had just kind of done exactly what I'd said: sit on your hands, put the bleeding bottle somewhere that you're never going to go, and return to it in a little while, and it's just a beauty, you know. Wow. And that I think is one of the joys. It's in a really odd way. That's a really good example of something that's one of the joys of being in touch with the seasons, you know, and growing your own food. Because for me, that in a couple of weeks is going to be sweet Sicily vodka, you know, which is one of the loveliest drinks, and you're never going to buy that anywhere. You can't buy sweet Sicily, you know, as a product in the shops. So you've got to grow it yourself. And this to me is the exciting thing. I love the gardening, but the result is that you get to enjoy stuff that is just extraordinary.
Yeah, and be adventurous, you know, because there's people like you saying, what about, try this, do that, you know, and it gives everybody the confidence to do it.
Well, I think this is it. I mean, we you know, I'm very inclined to have my nose over the allotment wall if I'm walking wherever it may be, you know. And I love allotments. I love the quiet companionability, stroke, stay away. I'm perfectly happy on my own here. Thank you. But it is interesting that I read this years ago, so maybe it's not still true, but I have a feeling it is, that 77% of our edible space, you know, so our back gardens, our allotments, where we grow edible stuff, we dedicate to the staples of main crop potatoes, main crop onions, main crop carrots. Now, if I remain convinced that a lot of that is just tradition. You know, it's handed down. It's what we don't necessarily know that there are options. You know, if nobody had grown anything before, and we are suddenly given a little patch of garden, and you know, your version of the all-powerful being says, there you go. Out of this marvelous life that you've led, out of all the places you may or may not have seen, all the recipes you've seen around the world, whatever you can grow in this climate, you can put in that space. What do you want to grow? And if your answer is, I'd like to grow the cheapest, most widely available, most disease-prone food there is, then, you know, I'm slightly surprised. I'm not saying don't grow any of that stuff, for heaven's sake. But what I'm saying is take your hands off the familiar choices and look at all the other amazingness out there. You know, we're not just talking about odd stuff. I'm talking about pepper. You know, we can't grow black pepper, but we can grow other kinds of pepper in this country. There are all kinds of delicious flavors. You know, mulberries, which are maybe one of the first things that I'd ever eaten, where for me, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't eaten mulberries about 22, 23 years ago, and been so knocked sideways by how delicious they were. And the realization that the only way I could do this again was if I grew them myself. You know, I happened to be staying with somebody in Suffolk who had a mulberry tree, and it happened to be August, and there it was, all the fruit. It was really extraordinary. I was thinking, why isn't this stuff? And it was a real thing of the most delicious food doesn't necessarily make it to our shops because it doesn't necessarily fit their way, you know, the shop's way of being supplied. And mulberries are so delicate and full of loveliness that they just can't make that journey. So, and there are a lot of other foods like that for different reasons don't fit that supermarket model. So we should consider them because they're delicious. And if our answer still at the end of the day is no, give me a jacket spud, happy days. You know, I just want people to have a look at the choices that are there and also the ways in which they can be grown.
Yeah. No, that's good. I always think that about gooseberries. You can't go out and buy gooseberries, but you can grow gooseberries very easily. Good. You know, why don't supermarkets sell gooseberries? What's wrong? You know.
It's interesting, and I think for a long time, both in terms of kind of plant breeding, but also what we do domestically, our diets have been getting sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. So something like a gooseberry that's inherently got that sharpness to go with the sweet. And I absolutely, I mean, gooseberries, rhubarb, they may be, they're certainly in my top 5 fruit. They're sharp, and our palates have been coming this way, longer and longer. And it's interesting. I spent a day with Raymond Blanc once, and he had just done, because as you probably know, what he does with all the varieties that they grow at Le Manoir is they taste test them in all the ways. So if it's a cooking apple, they'll steam it, they'll stew it, they'll bake it, they'll whatever, and they'll do it, and they'll time it, and all of that stuff in different recipes. And he'd just done it with celeriac, and everybody in the team tastes it, and they decide they kind of give it marks. And Raymond Blanc's going, do you know what's really frustrating is even my chefs who have been here for however long, and we share so many sensibilities, they are preferring ones that are down the sweeter end. And he's like, I want that bitterness. I want, and he said, the trouble, our palates are daily being shifted that way. But I think the tide's slightly turning. We are eating more fermented foods. We're eating more sour foods. I think also the trouble is there's a lag between what the supermarket wants and our ability to then suddenly grow it. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah. And of course, and your book Sour, is that how? I mean, that's been out for how long now?
September, I think. September.
Yeah.
September, October.
Yeah.
And that's a food book, but it's about those souring skills. The fermenting, the sourdoughs, all of that different stuff, as well as the natural sour stuff. Some of which we can grow, some of which we can't. But more importantly, or equally importantly, how sourness is such a brilliant tool in the kitchen for balancing and for finding ways of enjoying the other flavors better, as well as being a glorious thing in itself.
Sour is definitely having a fight back, I think. I mean, from Asian cuisines, we've got tamarind and sumac, but that's kind of spearheaded this, and of course fermenting's come along. So I think that the sour vanguard is back.
It's right there.
Yeah. So Mark, you've got some interesting things to show us, I understand. Have you? Some interesting.
I've got a few. I mean, it's not the ideal time to be wandering around showing you plants, because most of them haven't got stuff that is kind of ready. But just a few different kind of different plants that might be worth considering, and on any scale. Whether it's in a garden or whether it's hang on, I'm just trying to sort this out. You can get them into gardens. You can get them into pots. You can put them anywhere you like. I'm just trying to share the screen with you.
So if you click on share, and then it should come up with your desktop, and then you can choose the one that you want to open up. It should give you an option.
It gives me a desktop to open. Shall I do that?
Depending on what's on your desktop, is what you want to open on your desktop? Is it what you want to show us?
Got you. I've got it now. Hang on. Yeah. It's just asking me to open system preferences.
Yeah. So you need to have whatever you want to show us open and ready to rock and roll. Really.
It's all open and ready.
Okay. Great.
So I think it should be sharing.
Give it a minute. I'm still seeing you.
That's a terrible thing.
Yeah, we've had enough of you. We want to see some nice science and plants. Here we go. Right, lovely.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Now, do you want me to make that larger, or is that kind of good?
Yeah. If you it's in Keynote, isn't it? So if you do it as if you were playing it full screen, that would be brilliant. Gotcha. Yeah. Great.
Okay. Well, there's just a few that I think are really worth considering, and I just put a few in because that are chosen because they're different sorts of things. Maybe people would be thinking, yeah, but what about, I want to grow some tubers, I want to grow some herbs. So I've just put a few different things in. One of the areas that I'm really interested in is where the sort of ornamental garden and the edible garden meet, and I grow a lot of perennials, which I'm very attached to. And I thought it'd be useful to have a couple of my favorite ones. Carolina allspice, which is, just a smasher. It's really, really beautiful plant, you know, and the flowers come out, you know, in a few weeks' time. No, probably in a few weeks' time. They've got these glorious kind of glossy green leaves, and the scent from the flowers is really quite extraordinary. You know, the flowers themselves are poisonous. That's not the bit you eat, but they're native of the river basins of the southern states of America. So they don't mind our climate, which can be a bit wet and a bit sunny too. They're known over there as well. One of the names, the colloquial names for the Carolina allspice is the bubby plant, which came from the booby plant because the ladies of the area apparently would twist off the flower and pop it in the old cleavage, and that would release the perfume. See, yeah.
Now we've got
very lovely thing.
We've got Amber, who's one has got a question. I grow Carolina allspice, but outside of growing it, I have no idea how to take the raw ingredient and use it. Would be great to have some tips.
Well, I missed that. I missed the second half of the question. So she's growing it, but she doesn't know how to use it.
She grows it, but how do you cook with it? So what do you do with it? Yeah.
Smashing. Well, it's pretty hardy, but it can take a little bit of winter dieback if it gets really, really cold. But that's not the end of the world, because those bits you can prune off, or you prune them off anyway. And what you're looking for is the bark. So as you can probably see on the right-hand picture, there's kind of a bit of woody bark, and then there's some nice new growth. And the bits that you want are the kind of woodier bits. Prune a bit of those off, and then strip the bark off and just leave it to dry in the house. And that is not quite the same as cinnamon. It's like cinnamon if it's had a snog with star anise, I would say. It's got a little bit more of that loveliness about it. And it's really, 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 really good. But all the other parts of the plant do not get anywhere near eating. It's the bark. It's really good. You can dry it. You can use it in a cinnamon in the way that you would put a little bit of the bark in, or you can dry it a little bit further, maybe in a really low oven, turn it into a powder, and use it in the same way. It's such a great plant, and the scent is really good. I mean, I'm really, really keen on plants that are that give you other things, and especially scent is a really big one for me. Visually, obviously, is fantastic, but it's just such a great plant.
And Mark, it's not fussy about pH, is it? Can you grow it anywhere?
Yeah, it's been. I've grown it in quite a few places where, and in varying soils. It's if you're going to have it in something that's really quite well drained, you might have to water it more often than not, because it is native of those river basins, you know. But here in most of Britain, you know, it's pretty good. But if the further north you're going to have it, I would say just maximise the shelter, try and avoid a frost pocket, and give it lots of sunshine if you can, you know.
Great. And I'm not sure if I'm not sure if medlars are on your list of things to talk about, but Neil Johnson wants to know, have you made any drinks from medlars?
Well, I've got a picture of medlars I can scoot to in a minute, and maybe in case people aren't familiar with what a medlar is, but most certainly is the answer.
Okay.
Sorry, on the subject of
not all
Carolina allspice, is that Calycanthus? What's the Latin?
Yeah, it's a Calycanthus. There are a couple that essentially work the same way. There's Calycanthus floridus and there's Calycanthus forgottenitus. What is it? It's Carolina, maybe. No, Calycanthus.
Anyway, Calycanthus, that's the main bit, the genus.
Calycanthus, yeah, and floridus is the one that I grow mostly. There is another one that I've grown as well, and I can't recall it, so I can't remember.
Well, Lucille has said that it's Calycanthu cartilage wine is one.
Oh,
yeah, or
cartilage wine.
Yeah, or there's one called Calycanthus occidentalis. Somebody's Jenny Harris is offering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. Somebody could, Eleanor, could you turn off your? I'm going to do it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're. That's it. You're off. Okay.
Hello there, Eleanor. So yes, there are more around, but Floridus has been the one that's done best for me, certainly in the southwest of England, anyway.
Okay, so Jared Barnes, I think Jared's in the States, I think I'm right in saying. Calicanthus cross Ralstonii, Hartledge wine, bred at North Carolina State by J.C. Ralston, and Richard Hartledge is the hybrid. Thank you, Jared. Wonderful.
That's really good to know. Do you know what? I think I think I need to come and live in the States for a decade, and enjoy all of the glorious varieties of things that they have over there, of things that I grow here that I can't necessarily get from there. But that would be fun. That would be fun. Szechuan pepper is maybe another one that I'm probably fairly well known for growing. You remember when I was making that list originally of things that I was going to grow that were essentially things that I wanted to eat. I was kind of, I guessed that you couldn't grow pepper in this country because no one did, and we've got 99.5% of the country have pepper on their table every day, all day of the year, but nobody was growing it. So I guessed you couldn't, but I checked. And I found that there seemed to be a few varieties, not a black pepper, which is a vine and Kerala and loves a bit of the tropics and all of that. But there were certainly three other groups of pepper that you could: Nepalese, Japanese, and Szechuan pepper. And I love them all. They're all really distinctive, really delicious. Had such a key role in the flavours and the development of the style of food that each region is famous for. So Szechuan pepper, the food of Szechuan province is kind of zingy and lively and bright, and there's lots of citrus involved, and there's lots of punch involved. There's also a fair amount of chili, whereas if you go to, say, Japan, it's much, the food in Japan tends to not be high chili, but tends to be lots of flavour, boldness, but also a peculiar sort of gentleness too. And the pepper is very much like that. And in Japan, they'll probably use they'll use the leaves more than the peppercorns. But for me, this is one of the great plants to be growing yourself.
And Mark, you often suggest growing this as a hedge, don't you?
You can grow. I mean, this is the glorious thing about this is the Szechuan pepper, or all of those three peppers, is that you can either keep it pretty small in a pot, by the front door, reasonable sized pot. Keep it fairly small, or you plant one in a field and let it go 30 feet tall, or you can grow it as a hedge. It takes absolutely none of your time from you unless you want to keep it in a certain shape or size, and then you can prune it as you like. You can, it's just one of those gloriously adaptable and beautiful plants, and for, I guess, the 9.5 to 10 months of the year that it's in leaf, every day I'd be walking the dog, walking past it and just touching those leaves, because the scent is extraordinary, and the scent of
Latin name.
So all of these are Xanthoxylum.
Xanthoxylum.
But there's and Xanthoxylum piperitum is the Japanese. There are 2 or 3 that are the Nepalese, and then there's a whole raft of them that are kind of in the suite of Szechuan pepper. There's all sorts.
A couple of questions, Mark. James Golden wants to know, do you think he can grow it in the northeastern states? He's in New Jersey.
No question.
Yeah. Okay.
Really no question at all. I mean, all of these plants, I mean, I've grown, I don't know, maybe 30 different kinds. They've all been down to -18 here in Devon with me. Some have been in waterlogged, not standing water, but pretty squodgy, Devonshire soil. I've mown one over in a tractor with a topper on the back, and it's come back. And the only thing they don't want is, when they're young, is to be attacked by a load of rabbits. So rabbit guard the devils if you're in an area where rabbits are, which is kind of everywhere. But they're so hardy.
Okay, Nora Bowser wants to know, how do you prepare or preserve the berries? So what's your technique?
Well, this is another, again, there's lots of flexibility here, which is, so when Hampton Court Show, which is in early July here in England, so what you would think of probably as early summer, wherever you are, assuming you're somewhere that's seasonal, that's when the berries have appeared. They're green. You can rub them, and they're really pokey and powerful, quite citrusy, quite intense pepper. and if you taste one, they're really good, but they're quite metallic, which is not in a bad way. It's quite hard to describe. And they stay green, and you can pick them from then until right the way through to the point at which, as you can probably see on the picture on the right of the two, there's when they've been picked, that outer casing that's red will split, and at that point, the seed that's inside, because that outer casing is just the casing, the black seed inside falls out, and from there, if you're very lucky and happen to live in the right place, a new plant will spring. But you want to pick them before the casing itself has fallen off the plant. So in England again, and it varies by variety, but somewhere between middle of October and Christmas is, depending on the variety, is when they'll go. So you can pick them at any point during that stage. If you want to keep them, if you're going to use them straight away, using them green's good, but keeping them when they're green is not very easy, because you want the redness in it. They're desiccated a bit by growing through the summer. You take them off, and if I go to the next picture, there's Brad Pitt. There we are. There's my wife laying out a whole load of them. So we would just leave them out on a surface. It could be your windowsill, it could be a kitchen table, it could be something larger than that if you've got more of them, and just let the moisture come out. If you let the moisture come out of them, or use a dehydrator if that's what you've got, you'll find that they go through the pepper mill much easier. But you don't have to have them going through a pepper mill. But I would say just let them dry out for a day or two. Otherwise, they can go a little bit, moldy and not so great. I think you can see on the picture there on the right, the black seed falling out of a few of them. That's your sign that that's about the latest you want to start picking them. And I don't know if you can tell in the detail there, but that central bit where the black seed is coming out, the casing itself has got a little browner. So if you want the red colour, which often you do if you're selling them, pick it a little bit before that stage.
And we have a question from Denmark. Do you recommend it? Do you recommend it for use as a hedge in Denmark, which is, fairly similar climate to here, I guess?
Absolutely. There's so many plants that we don't think of using in hedges that we could, and I think Szechuan pepper is really good because it's good as a stock plant, because those thorns on some of the varieties are pretty pokey, and it's maybe the only thing that once they get established, a deer is not going to go messing around with. So I found them quite useful. I ringed an apricot orchard with Szechuan pepper plants, and that was really great, because the very quickly it formed enough of a barrier that the deer weren't going to come through.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Win-win.
Lots of wins, but there's a few other small stuff that can I scoot through a couple more?
Yeah,
people want to know where you can get them. Do you sell them?
otterfarm.co.uk, we sell them, but other people do too, and different varieties. So what I would say is have a look about, because the difference in flavour and scent is small, but it's still significant, and it may be that you want one that's slightly more limey, or you want one that's more intense, or whatever. I know Paul Barney at Edulist Nursery does them as well. Have a nose, because there's a lot of them around. The trouble is they're not cheap to buy, because getting them to be this big, maybe a foot and a half, 50 centimeters or so, is quite tricky. You sow 100 seeds, 10 of them germinate, 5 of them then die, and getting them that size takes a fair bit of work. But the thing is, then once you bought one, you and everyone you've ever met and befriended on any kind of social media is going to be in delicious pepper for the rest of their lives, because they produce in maybe year 2 or 3 and produce a lot.
Yeah, that's good. Lovely Pat, who's in South Wales, says that Jacqui sells them as well. Jacqui McVicker on her site.
Does she?
Yeah. But yours are the best, Mark, aren't they? Yeah.
No question about it. Yeah, no question about it. They've been through the mill in the southwest. Damn, Jacqui's in the southwest too. Yes, get one where you fancy is what I'd say. Just get one, because they're so great. A few smaller things, just because, again, one of the other things that I grew very early on in my investigation of flavours that we'd forgotten about was sweet cicely. You know, it used to be hugely popular, was very much eaten with all the sour fruit we were talking about, you know, rhubarb and gooseberries and so on, because one of the things it does, it has an interesting kind of sweet aniseed flavour, but not really strong, but it stays there, you know, and it's very, very good if you cook with rhubarb and those sour fruit like gooseberries, because it gives the impression of sweetness without adding any sugar. So you can actually add less sugar, which is kind of useful for anyone who, for whatever reasons, wants to reduce the sweetness in the diet. But you can use it in lots of other ways as well, which is it's really good if you just run a knife through it and you know, into a herb omelette. It's so good. Very good in this. We did Sheila Dillon came down and did a food program with us maybe, I don't know, a dozen years ago, and it was in May. It was, you know, only a couple of weeks ahead of where we are now, and we did good King Henry leaves with asparagus and sweet cicely as a stir fry, the simplest thing you could possibly imagine. And she said, you know, she said on the radio, this is one of the greatest things I've ever eaten, you know. And it is, because these simple, delicious things, you know. And the great thing about sweet cicely is it also answers a lot of questions that gardeners often want to know about, you know. Give me stuff through the hungry gap. This comes out quicker than almost anything in the garden. Give me something that works in a shady area or a damp area. This is just happy as hell, you know, with that. I want something to cover an area quite quickly, but not overly densely. This again works because it self-seeds really readily and happily. So you get a lot of free deliciousness if you want it to. At the same time, it's really easy to avoid if you don't want it to move around the place. Twist off the seeds, which are on the right-hand picture. Such a gorgeous plant, and every part of it is edible. And actually, I was asked a question time thing not long ago. A school gardener said, you know, we're creating a garden here with the kids. I want to show them the life stages of a plant really quickly. Can you do that? I'm like, sweet cicely. It comes up out of the ground, goes to flower really, really quickly, turns to seed really, really quickly, and does that, you know, in such a nice period of time that it's really easy for any age group of child to grasp this kind of process of growing and kind of maturing and producing offspring. And it's lovely, and so many beneficial insects like it. And there are so many ways to enjoy it as well.
It's strange, Mark, that we don't see it grown more than we see it, you know, and we don't see it on offer in a sort of, you know, a herb, you know, people who sell herbs. I mean, herb specialists, yes, but isn't it a shame that why do you think that is? Because people have forgotten how to use it, or? I
think, you know what I was saying earlier about allotments, you know, that in lots of ways we can, you know, if we're not careful, we're sort of tribute farmers, you know, we're buying we're growing what we can buy. And I think a lot of the time we ought to be thinking, what is so, at least ask ourselves the question, what do I fancy growing that I can't eat any other way? You know, I'm here on this planet for such a small time. Let me enjoy lots of the flavours, you know. Now I understand, and God, I love spuds and carrots and all of that stuff. I'm not saying don't grow it, but I think we can be overly cautious when it comes to food. And I think we can be overly cautious when it comes to gardening because we don't want to get it wrong. And I think our fear of getting things wrong can, in any form of life, can just hold you back from having the best time of it. And I still think most people, and this would have been me 25 years ago, you know, before I started growing stuff, we're suspicious of stuff we don't know about food-wise. You know, how can that, why isn't it, if that was so good, why isn't it in the supermarket? And in this one's case, I think a lot of it is that it's chicken and egg. You know, if they start putting that in the supermarket, people will start buying it, but they need a case to put it in the supermarket. So something, for example, like lemon thyme, you wouldn't have seen anywhere 5-10 years ago in the supermarkets, but because thyme does so well, suddenly the Waitroses and so on here, you know, the some of the kind of the higher, more expensive end of the supermarkets here in England will suddenly be doing lemon thyme and different varieties like that because they've got a way in. And I think this would be absolutely one that would go that way if just a little bit of time was spent telling people how to use it. And that is the other thing, you know, if you're going to grow this stuff, have some recipes. And that's what I've tried to do in the books and online, is to do exactly that.
Question: Is it easy to germinate?
Yes, there's only one caveat to that. As in a lot of things in life, easy, yes, but particular also. So what it needs,
fresh seed.
Sorry, no.
Fresh seed.
Yes. It's got to be. The seed loses viability very quickly, but also what it naturally does is that seed drops off in May, June, July, whenever, because there will be cycles of flowering and seeding through the year, and then it gets the cold. And that's the thing that really makes the difference. So wherever you want this, if you want to get seed of it, that's great. Make sure it's fresh seed and then sow it. But sow it before winter so it gets the winter through. Or you can mimic that to some degree of success by bunging the seed in the freezer for a while and going from there. But yes, that's the thing to do.
Biennial?
It will. It's a funny thing, Sweet Cicely, because because I plant it and let it go to seed, it just does its thing. So I see just flowers every year, seed every year, coming up every year in a great swathe of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of these umbellifers are biennial. The seed is apparently the biggest, heaviest seed of any British wildflower. They're enormous, aren't they?
Is that?
Yeah.
Do you know what they say? Every day is a school day, and you totally win there for me. Thank you, Noel, because you want something to go away. I would have never have known that fact, and that's a brilliant. But they are there,
Yeah,
and beautiful,
Umbellifers. If you sow them as soon as they fall off the plant, or as soon as they're about to fall off the plant, come up like mustard and cress. If you leave them, you then have to leave them out in the autumn for all the winter chilling, and they come up next spring. So, but sowing it fresh and just seeing what happens, it's so important with any of them.
Yeah, absolutely right. But again, if you just go slightly wider of the stuff that's in the shops, suddenly you've got things that answer kind of gardening questions as well as where they're filling gaps that time's never going to fill. They'll go into places that we've all got in our gardens where they're a bit shadier, where they're a bit tucked away, where you might want a little bit of coverage under another kind of tree, maybe. So a lot of these things will do lots of hard work for us, which we might not otherwise we might not ever have a plant for, and delicious too.
Yeah, it's a nice looking thing, actually.
Isn't it lovely? And they've got the kind of the way they sit. The leaves on the left hand picture haven't quite they kind of come up and then they sit kind of flat, don't they? And they're almost like landing pads for beneficial insects and stuff. A couple other quick flavors for you. I mean, again, I try to think of in ways of growing flavor as much as anything else. So scented geraniums, scented pelargoniums, I should say, or I'll get told off for calling them scented geraniums. On the left, one of my favorite, again, summer flavors. Yes, yeah, quite right to wag your finger at me there. But there are so many different flavors that you can get them in. And rose is probably the kind of classic one, because the scent and also the flavor, again, very close, quite similar to Turkish delight, which is so you can again extract that flavor in the way you might from bay by infusing and so on. The other picture is another one of my favorites, which is shiso, aka perilla, which is a really, really interesting plant, in that until I grew it, I wasn't aware that there was this kind of big gap between the kind of freshness of mint and the kind of warm welcominess of cumin, and it sits right in there. Somehow it's bright and breezy, but it's got that earthiness that you can get it in this kind of lovely purpley leaf variety here, or in a kind of one that's the color of Teddy Boy's socks, which is just splendid. You can let it go to seed if you want. The flowers are really delicious. The seed, again, it will self sow all you like. I tend to with this one, because it works so well, I tend to sow it in kind of drifts, so into fairly reasonably prepared ground. I just sow it like crazy.
This is one of those things I've had real problems with, and it's apparently as an annual. It does need apparently winter chilling. But so when do you sow it?
I've sown it in May.
Really?
I've sown it in May. Maybe the end of April.
Yeah. I grew some once.
No earlier than certainly the last week of April. And the reason I know it was then is that I just built and created a new wall garden, and I just had some seed, and I just I wanted to fill an area really quickly, and I sowed it, and it came up, and it was it just was so productive and marvelous. So that literally, I promise you, that was it, Noel. Yeah, it was really happy.
I'll try it again. And of course, this is the key.
I can't claim any genius.
The key ingredient in Japanese umaboshi plums, which
exactly that
you either absolutely love, or run a mile from. The combination,
isn't it just?
And sour and perilla. It's just, I think they're just some of the most amazing things you can put in your mouth.
We've got a couple of questions,
I agree.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. With the scented pelargonium, and this is a question from Becca. What do you cook with, and how do you use it? Do you need to dry it, or what do you do? Just use the leaves?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because and for some reason it's the last one that people ask about something rather than being the first one. How do I eat it? How do I get to enjoy it apart from in the garden setting? In a way, it's quite useful to think of them as quite like a bay leaf. You're not going to be eating the actual thing nearly all the time. What you want is to extract its flavour, and the way of doing that with scented pelargoniums is to you've got to infuse it somehow, and that usually with any of that stuff falls into three categories. One is dairy, tends to take these things on quite well. Warm dairy, so it could be milk, could be cream. In some cases, it could be cheese. Something like lovage is very good, crumbly cheese wrapped in lovage leaves. But with this, I would say nearly always for me, I would be using this with a sugar syrup. So equal, and whatever herb syrup, I will have the same kind of recipe, which is equal weight of sugar and water. So 500 grams of water, 500 grams of sugar. Dissolve it over a medium heat. As soon as it's dissolved, take it off the heat and cast in your herb. How much herb you put in doesn't matter too much. If you put a skipful in, you're still going to do the same thing, is taste it. Once it's the strength you want, get the herb out, for God's sake, get it out quick. So, if you put hardly any in, that's fine, but it will take longer to do. So don't get hung up about how much you put in. The more you put in, the quicker it will be ready, okay? And at that point, get the herb out, let it cool down, the syrup, and you can use it straight away. I would be using it then in cocktails, really good. Fruit cocktails, really, really good. Ice cream, again, but I would infuse it then with milk for that, and cream. It's also really good. Once you've got the syrup, it will keep for ages, especially if you use that equal weight of sugar and water, because it's quite high sugar, so it will keep it well preserved. If you've got fridge space, keep it there. Otherwise, somewhere cool and dark. Another great way of using it, the syrup, is to make a lemon, like you would a lemon drizzle cake. Make the cake and then make holes in the top of it and pour some of the syrup in, and it will infuse it. Very, very good Turkish delight you can make, again, making a syrup that takes the flavour of the scented geranium, scented pelargonium. You can also, if you're baking a cake, is to butter the tin, as you might before you pour the batter in, and put the leaves out on the edge of the tin, and then pour in the batter, and the flavour will infuse in the batter in that way too.
Wow.
But just like I say, there's so many different flavours. You can get everything from rose to lemon to pine, hazelnut. Some of them are slightly, well, like tribute bands. They're slightly closer to the original than others. So have a rub of the leaf again.
The chocolate ones in particular, as you say, sort of poor imitation. Now, we've had a question about hostas. Now,
about what? Sorry,
we've had a question about eating hostas. Now, but basically, in the Far East, in China and Japan, people in the countryside will eat, or even in the cities, will eat an amazing range of plants. I heard that the Japanese eat hostas, and I thought, well, actually, let's give them a go.
Yeah.
And I didn't particularly care for them, but I suspect there's probably some varieties are much better than others. So, any guidance on hostas and how to cook them, perhaps?
Yeah, the thing I would say is as with a lot of these things, it's the shoots rather than the leaves I would be going for. And that's what I would say with the hostas. The sort of early shoots are really, really good. Then I mean, you've got to be careful not to overcrop, obviously, because then you're going to end up with a plant that's not strong enough to be growing merrily away itself. I've got a couple of varieties here that are quite good because here we go. There's Fortunii is apparently the most delicious. Now, to me, but you can eat they're the flower buds you're after for those. So the emerging shoots, I think, are those shoots in the same way that they are with Good King Henry. I think are the best bits. I would not mess around with them. I would treat them very much as you would asparagus. So steamed pretty soon after picking them. Something buttery, maybe for me a lot of pepper and a little parmesan, but even the parmesan can overdo it because the flavors are very delicate. So yeah, the flower shoots, the shoots themselves, the leaves, they've never, yes, they're edible, but they're not going to get me running up the garden in the same way that asparagus does.
And of course, Japanese knotweed is very nice stir fried, isn't it?
My wife is she's got more of I mean, I love my foraging, but she's kind of, we can be talking about anything interesting. And if she sees anything that's even vaguely edible, if we're out for a walk somewhere, then that conversation ends. And she gets rather excited. So one of the walks, we did a walk first thing this morning and along the river, and there's all manner of stuff around at the moment. There's lots of three-cornered leek. There's lots of the end of the wild garlic while it's flowering away, and there's a lot of knotweed. There's all sorts around at the moment, and all of it, really, really just not like, hey, there it is, it's free, let's pick some, but properly, as you say, Noel, absolutely delicious, and well worth that bit of investigation. Again, you've got to get it at the right time. Don't get wild garlic too late on because it comes too tough and a bit too much of a sort of punch rather than the subtle blend of, yes, you want some punch, but you want lots of aroma and loveliness too. But yeah, absolutely right.
Mark, Lucy Bell wants to know which of your books covers the plants that you've been talking about today.
That's good because it's the only one I've got to hand. So this one, Cook and Grow. So I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I wrote The New Kitchen Garden, which is a big hardback tome that has maybe a dozen of the gardens that I'd been to where people grow things interestingly and differently. And in there were about 200 of the plants that I've grown that are all edible and all delicious. And I've left a couple out because I don't care for them. And I don't think I want to be inviting people to grow things that I think are not especially delightful. But it's getting on for 200 plants and it has, the description of, what they are, the best varieties that I've had, maybe how to start them off, what they like, spacing, productivity, growing, potential problems, anything about the harvest. It's one of those nice fit in your pocket books for a tenner or so. Yeah, and that's literally a month old. And it's there's a lot of making mistakes going into that book, so that none of the mistakes are actually in it. Sorry, no, I missed that.
So long as you don't poison anyone.
Yeah, no, there's nothing poisonous. All edible, all delicious. Yeah.
A couple of last questions. Pat from Wales, can you preserve wild garlic?
Yeah, wild garlic is one of the great ones for preserving. You can preserve pretty much anything, but what you want at the end of it is something that's at least as good as what you started with, and wild garlic's really good for that. So wild garlic pesto is a smasher, obviously, and many people will be making that. Wild garlic oil is really undermade. So, you know, it's essentially, you know, all you've really got there is the wild garlic and the oil, but you to do that rather than make it into a pesto. So yes, finely shred it up. Wild garlic vinegar is really good, although that can get quite funky after a while. So I wouldn't leave it too long to use that. But I think it's really, really good fermented, which is one
of our viewers, Joey Beckley, says, we collect bin liners full, freeze it and put it in everything.
That's it. I mean, it does freeze so very well. If you're ever stuck for what to do with, you know, an absolute sea of wild garlic, you would be well advised to do exactly as he's done. Get it frozen, because it keeps so much of its brilliant quality. You know, I think it's really, really fab like that. But yeah, any of that, it's so adaptable to any of those things and keeps most of its great qualities.
Brilliant. Any things, because we're coming up to an hour now, Mark. We don't want to. We know you've got lots to do, but any last minute snippets, or are there any questions from people? Anything you want to leave us with?
Anything I want to leave you with? I guess in all of this, I would say one of the things to be really, really careful of if you're considering growing stuff, either for the first time or for the 28th time, is the importance of choosing good varieties. You know, it takes no more effort to grow the most delicious pea in the world or the most bland one. You know, you're doing the same work, you're spending the same money. So do a little bit of homework, talk to other people, read the descriptions, you know, and that counts even if it's something as familiar, say, as elder. You know, we've got it here in England all over the place. Not so much in hedgerows because it's not a great stock plant, but in kind of corners and copses and maybe in wild areas and towns. So, but even beyond that, you know, you can, for our gardens, we can introduce, say, the one on the right, which is a kind of purple leaved one. You know, they're absolutely gorgeous. And has that kind of lovely purpleness to the flowers that sticks up. But another one that I think again is worth at least investigating is the American elder. The glorious thing about American elder, there's a few things that's glorious about it. Number one is they're huge. I mean, that is one flower. So, you know, you're looking at this kind of size, you know, maybe 3 times across even what you would get in the largest ones here. But the great thing about them as well is that they flower after ours and they are not self-fertile. So they're not self-fertile, nothing's going to pollinate them because ours isn't around. So you get a season of elder, instead of being sort of April, May, is April, May, maybe up until about October of elder. And it's kind of odd, you know. What I'm saying is there's lots of options out there. So do look around for really brilliant varieties, especially if it's something perennial, because that could be producing for you for years and years to come.
We've got a really good question to wrap up with from Tim Hewitt. How do you stop the farty effects of Jerusalem artichoke?
Very good. Well, I guess, well, you've got a few options. Number one is just isolate yourself, as we're doing now. The other is some seeds work well. So celery seed works well. There are a couple of others that I can't quite call to mind. Fennel seed. A lot of the umbellifer seeds work really well in reducing that. But actually, the weird thing is, it's mostly that we can't digest one of the sugars in it so well. But the more we eat of them, the more we are able to digest it. We start producing the enzyme we need to do it. So I would say, in the short term, eat more, suffer a bit, and then you're fine. Because but you just got to. That's what you got to do. Eat more of them, and yes.
Wonderful. Well, on the chat line, I won't read out the response from Joey Beckley. I'll let everybody read it for themselves. But yeah, she's got some ideas, but I think we should leave it at that.
Well, I've now seen that. Thank you, Joe. You win on comment of the day.
Yeah, yeah, that could go in the next book. Perhaps that could be the byline.
No question.
Mark, it's been brilliant. I mean, I've
Thank you.
always found your books fantastic, and also your Instagram, you know, so inspirational, because it really does kind of pick you up. Oh yeah, of course, let's be doing that now, and it's that wonderful kind of lateral view about growing and cooking and using things. You know, old ideas, new ideas. I love it. It's just a brilliant inspirational mix. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've had 84 people listening live today.
Thank you, 84 people.
We'll get hundreds more on our YouTube channel.
Yeah,
As a reminder, actually, everybody, if you've missed one of these, go to our YouTube channel, and we're piling up an impressive list of programs there.
Yeah,
really wonderful.
Absolutely. But Mark, yeah, you're always brilliant value. And also Mark's one of our garden masterclass tutors for live events as well, where he makes people eat Szechuan peppers and watches the effect. So yeah.
But you do get cocktails. You do get cocktails too.
Get cocktails. There is alcohol involved, exactly. So
and chocolate brownies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. So thanks ever so much, Mark. You're a star, and we hope to hear from you again soon. And good luck with the book sales. Have you not got a copy of Sour to hold up and flash? I bet you have.
I literally haven't. It's I think it's downstairs.
You're the worst in the world.
I know. It's kind of fluorescent green. If you see a book that's the colour of Teddy Boy's socks, then it'll be the one. It's just called Sour. Oh crikey, that's really poor. Well, isn't it?
Yeah, but if people go to Otter Farm, so is it otterfarm.co.uk?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
And you're doing a special on herbs next week, aren't you? I saw.
Yes. A very short special, because we've only got we've got a load of packs that we wanted to send out while it's a good time of year to be doing that. So we've got some of those. It'll only last a few days, and then we'll think of something else.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. You're a star.
Total pleasure. And thank you for tuning in, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. And we look forward to seeing you all on Monday. And we've got another week pretty well organised, haven't we, Annie?
Yeah, we have. We've got some really interesting people again next week, dotting backwards and forwards across the Atlantic. Yeah, it's great. We've got some really nice things lined up. So everybody have a lovely weekend wherever you are. Stay safe. Enjoy the sun if you've got sunshine. Don't forget, if anybody tuned in after I mentioned that Hauser and Wirth Somerset website is showing the lovely Tom Piper film 4 Seasons for a free viewing. If you haven't seen it,